All right, this is section 1 of chapter 16, looking about Darwin, some of Darwin's voyages, some of the stuff that Darwin studied as he was starting to develop his theory for evolution and his theory for natural selection. Okay? All right, what Darwin did, his kind of importance to science is that he developed, so Darwin developed a scientific theory of biological evolution. And we're going to look at the stuff that he did to do that here in the next 5-10 minutes. And the things that he studied and kind of trip that he took. And what this theory of biological evolution did, it explained how organisms evolved over a long period of time. So Darwin's theory of biological evolution explained how modern organisms evolved over a long period of time. Like I said, 30-year questions or so, I would imagine that would be similar or have something dealing with speciation and evolution in some form or fashion. Okay, so pretty important as far as your test goes at the end of the semester. All right, first thing, Darwin was born in England, 1809. Darwin was kind of born during a period of science community that things were starting to change quite drastically. The ideas of the natural world were changing. Some of the ideas on how things got here and how things are the way they were, that stuff all started to change. For example, one of those that during this time, we're going to talk a little bit more about these guys, but geologists were suggesting that the Earth was pretty old, ancient in fact, and it was changing over time. Biologists were also suggesting that life did the same thing. And this was when the early 1800s, is when we first started kind of hearing about the process of evolution. And the definition of evolution just simply is the process of change over time. The process of change over time is called evolution. And we're going to be looking at a whole bunch of different, types or ways that evolution could have or could not have happened. Darwin took off on a 5-year trip on a boat called, or a ship, I guess, called the HMS Beagle. Darwin took off on a journey called that on a ship that was the HMS Beagle. Going down the coastline of South America, he was going to collect different specimens of plants and animals. When Darwin first took off with this, nobody really, knew it at the time. This was going to be essentially one of the more important scientific voyages in history. As Darwin was on the Beagle, he noticed three distinct biological patterns of diversity. These are the three. This is an SOL, so make sure you get these three things down. The first one is that species vary globally. That means that on different parts of the world, the species vary. Different types of species at different places all across the world. Secondly, species also vary locally. So within the same ecosystem, in the same area or general area, there's a variety of species of animals. And then thirdly was that species vary over time. So species vary globally, locally, and over time. And those are the three patterns of biological diversity that Darwin noticed and that he documented while he was taking his trip on the HMS Beagle. All right, Darwin was traveling, noticed a bunch of different things. For example, first thing here, species varying globally. He found flightless ground-dwelling birds he called rayas living in the grasslands of South America. They look and act a lot like ostriches, yet they only live in South America, and ostriches only live in Africa. He went to Australia. He saw the emu, very similar but a different species. Okay, Australia's got had the grasslands or the home to kangaroos and other animals that are found essentially nowhere else. So there's some geographic distribution of animals there. Also locally, Darwin found 2 different species of those rayas that he saw living in South America. One in Argentina's grassland, and the other one in the colder, harsher grass and scrubland to the south. Both of them rayas, but different species. So species vary locally as well. I guess real big for Darwin was Darwin's finches, and something that he was really studied a lot. He noticed that several small brown birds, beaks had different shapes, different, they're longer or shorter or skinnier or fatter or whatever. It was the same bird, just a different type of beak, and that's what started to lead to some of the speciation stuff in natural selection. And then finally, species also varied over time. Darwin collected fossils. Now, I know that we all know what fossils are, but we need to have a good scientific definition of fossils. So fossils are just simply the preserved remains of ancient organisms. Not that you didn't know that, but and what Darwin noticed with the fossils that he was finding were that some of the fossils of animals that were no longer around, so extinct animals, had some similarities. Weren't the exact same, but had some similarities to the fossils of living species that he was looking at or that he was finding as he was going on these voyages. So what Darwin started to do as he was, going through this voyage, trying to put some of these things together on why certain species were living at certain places that had a little bit of differences, or why there were certain species of bird, for example, that weren't the exact same in completely different places of the world, but had some of the similarities. And why was that? How'd that happen? How'd they get there? That type of thing. And what he noticed and began to wonder is whether different Galapagos species evolved from some of the South American ancestors. Okay, and so the evidence suggests that species are not fixed and that they can be changed by some natural process. And that's what he spent quite a few years, and that's kind of what we'll be looking at, throughout the rest of this chapter and the chapters that is to come.